Soren Kierkegaard said, "There are two ways of being fooled. 1. To believe what is not true. 2. To refuse to believe what is true."
Hilariously ironic that you would bring that up, since you are about to both ignore factual scientific reality whilst also believing in nonsensical quote-unquote science, leaving you with an utterly incoherent worldview, all the while smugly asserting just how right you are, while actually being arguably the wrongest person who has ever lived. Smart.
All the arguments put forward here boil down to one issue.
That you, Eric Dubay, are a stupid motherfucker who has somehow managed to find himself a bafflingly large audience, who constantly reinforce your deluded sense of scientific entitlement, and who you in kind convince that they are correct whilst being similarly ridiculous morons. All of you ever spiraling down into insane beliefs that couldn't possibly reflect reality. But who needs reality when you've got endless arrogance instead? That's just as good.
Does the Earth move against a background of stationary stars? Or is the Earth still and the stars moving?
Holy shit, your entire premise fails at the very first and frankly inch-tall hurdle. Neither of those. The stars are not stationary. The Earth is not stationary. It all moves, you fucking dumbass. This is like the most basic of concepts in cosmology today. The universe is one big, constantly spinning, whirring mass of stuff, swinging wildly around in space and at the same time also expanding out in various directions. This is the most shockingly fundamental of errors, and shows that you don't just not believe in mainstream science, that you have no fucking idea what it even is. God damn it. Good start.
In the 17th and 18th centuries, scholars and scientists were beginning to accept the heliocentric model as factual, and astronomers were anxious to find an experiment that provided concrete evidence the Earth was moving.
You make it sound like they changed their minds for no reason and then needed to justify that post hoc. No, that's not how that works, and they didn't necessarily need an experiment to prove shit, because they had something better, observations. They could see the way the universe was working, and then when they followed those observations, it led them to conclusions, and those conclusions could be used to make predictions that in fact were accurate, demonstrating their understanding of those observations were in fact accurate. And when you can show that something is in fact how it works, people naturally start to follow the train of thought, as it tends to be the only one that actually explains what's really going on.
One solution appeared in the early 17th century by James Bradley, the British Astronomer Royal. His theory was that if the Earth was moving in orbit around the Sun, then the stars being still could be seen as a point of reference.
Well, he was wrong about them being stationary. Again, they move, and at a fair clip to boot. But to be fair, the technology of the time wasn't going to cut it for him to get that information. So what are you going to do? However, he was expecting to see parallax, that is to say, the appearance of movement of a distant object, usually a stationary one, relative to your movement, or in this case, the Earth's. Unfortunately, again, with the tools of the time, he was never going to be able to measure that. However,
if a particular star was chosen, for example Gamma Draconis, this star could serve as the anchor point. The Earth takes 1 year to make an orbit of the Sun, so if he plotted the apparent position of the star in relation to the Earth's movement in orbit, logically then, the plotted points would form a small circle or ellipsoid, a sort of reflection of the Earth's orbital movement.
This is fairly accurate to what he was expecting, although is not ultimately how it played out, by my understanding. The thing I find confusing and pretty exhausting about Eric is the fact that he can perfectly well describe a process or scientific concept, but will always conclude with some inane idea that has nothing to do with what he just discussed, usually by skipping a key part of the actual science or factual description of the thing. The willful ignorance is at Olympic levels, I swear.
Bradley set up a telescope pointing up vertically to see the star, and expected over time, as the Earth moved in orbit, the line of sight of the star would fall out of vision, so the telescope had to be tilted to keep the stationary stars in sight as the Earth moved. Logically, he believed the telescope would have to be tilted several times. Bradley's experiment was hailed as a success and claimed to be one of the major appendixes of heliocentricity to this day.
Okay, ignoring the fact that heliocentricity, aka that the sun is the center of the universe, the thing that people would often believe back then, that is not even remotely a thing educated people of today think how the universe works. But you seem to have skipped the fundamental discovery that Matey Boy made. It was stellar aberration. Basically, yes, he had to move the telescope, but you have ignored the juicy part. The way he expected to have to move it was in fact different to how he did. He thought it would have to move according to the Earth's position, but it instead had to be moved due to its velocity. And that was not the same thing, and was one of the first pieces of evidence that absolutely demonstrated that the Earth was moving. And like many good discoveries, wasn't what he was looking for, but like all good scientists, he accepted this observation and followed what it said, instead of some arbitrary random conclusion he would have preferred. You know, the opposite of what flat earthers do, basically.
But European astronomers were later thinking that Bradley's evidence was tenuous and threadbare, and that there must be a better way to determine once and for all that the Earth moves in orbit around the Sun.
I don't know where you got that idea from, other than betwixt your lying butt cheeks, but Bradley's discovery wasn't tenuous. It was fucking revolutionary, akin to Newton's discovery of the laws of gravity, or the distilling process and its ability to create whiskey. While sure, his thing was far less important than the second of those, it was foundational to our understanding of how the universe works to this very day. Also, of course, they wanted more experiments and observation. It's called fucking science. They are literally always trying to refine their understanding. That doesn't make the old shit wrong, just that in order to progress, you always need to keep testing these things.
Astronomers and scientists in Europe, however, were not happy with Bradley's experiment, believing the evidence to prove the Earth was moving tenuous and sketchy.
So weird that you almost said the exact same thing twice, and not in a, hi, my name is Eric Dubay, and also I'm a moron kind of way. Presumably you were trying to get out just the right level of sneaky double talk to make it sound like Bradley was a big dumbass and everybody knew it, but then you forgot to take out the inferior take. But here's the thing, everything you say is inferior. If you cut it all out, your videos would be infinitely better, although much less fun to refute.
Roger Joseph Boscovich, a Serbian theoretical astronomer, tried to reproduce Bradley's experiment, but using a water-filled telescope. This, he believed, would bend the starlight by refraction and slow down the light so the telescope would not need to be tilted as the Earth moved.
What the fuck? That is the opposite of what he was doing. In fact, his idea was attempting to increase the aberration. You know, the thing that you've yet to fucking mention for some reason. Cough, lying dickhead, cough, cough. The way he was doing it would actually have made him need to tilt the telescope even more. I don't know how you think lying helps you when it just makes you look deliberately dishonest. When, if you do even a cursory search for the truth of these statements, they are obviously not. And frankly, I question the necessity. When we all know, all you're going to do is say, nuh-uh, and then move on to your next misrepresentation of scientific reality anyway.
In 1866, George Bedell Airy, Astronomer Royal, repeated Boscovich's experiment using a water-filled telescope. Airy followed an accepted scientific methodology to the letter, and the records are still available to this day. Scientists and astronomers eagerly awaited Airy's results and were expecting the experimental, concrete evidence that Earth moves.
What are you talking about? By the time he was even in the picture, we had tons of concrete evidence that the Earth is in fact moving. It was literally part of the established scientific understanding. In fact, his experiment wasn't designed to do that at all, because it would be like the bazillionth person to prove that dropping an apple would make it fall to the floor. He was trying to prove the idea of the ether, a liquid-esque medium, hypothesized to essentially be what space is made of. And the major quote-unquote failure that he ran into was that the results he got didn't seem to line up with what you would expect from such an idea. But that is only because there isn't anything like that up there.
But Airy's result was not what was expected, and the experiment was dubbed Airy's failure, because he could not show progressive tilt of the telescope as the Earth moved.
Fuck's sake, his version of the experiment absolutely had the same kind of tilt that was fully expected from that kind of experiment. In fact, had he found none, that would have been a massive anomaly, akin to dropping the apple and having it fall into the fucking sky. The failure was, again, not having light behave in a way one would expect of it travelling through a medium, because again, it wasn't. Space is essentially empty, but they didn't think that at the time, and it wouldn't be until general relativity that the more complete understanding of how the universe works would be achieved. None of this had anything to do with proving heliocentrism, you goddamn moron.
Airy followed up on Bradley's work to prove the Earth was moving. But heliocentrists today say that Airy failed because he failed to find the ether, a mysterious substance that permeated the whole universe.
I decided he was looking for something he wasn't, but people who bothered to actually check what he was doing and why by, reading his fucking work, instead say he was doing a completely different thing that was exactly why it was called a failure in the first place. You cannot make this shit up, man. Wait, no, I mean the opposite. You keep making shit up, man. Perhaps you could, stop.
This is an example of how when scientists are cornered by genuine scientific evidence, they change the goalposts in order to make a failure into a resounding success.
No, you absolutely catastrophically duplicitous little asshole. This is an example of you doing historical fucking gaslighting, where you decide history is just different for no reason. People were doing things not for the reasons they fucking said they were, but for this other reason you decided, because you think lying is the same thing as skepticism. The ultimate irony being that you're doing the exact kind of historical revisionism that you are accusing everyone else of. If you projected any harder, we could use you to show my videos on the fucking moon. And then I could finally achieve the kind of global subscribership I rightly deserve. Hint, hint.
But Airy's experiment showed clearly the Earth does not move, supporting the geocentric paradigm, where the Earth does not move, quite contrary to the heliocentric model.
It did nothing of the sort. This is just you saying not true things in order to support your own incredibly stupid worldview, because that's what you have to do. While science boys are gathering endless proof of the true state of the universe, flat earthers are doing everything they can to trick their dumbass audiences into thinking that there's some giant conspiracy that's not even remotely fucking there.
To astronomer scientists, it was a failure. But to those pursuing scientific truth, the experiment was a resounding success.
Aside from the fact that all experiments have some level of value, it's only when one is going out of your way to prove a very specific thing, and you just end up proving something completely different, that it could possibly be considered a failure. And the only failure is to prove that one specific thing. But for people actually seeking truth, it doesn't matter what the results were. If they are accurate, they are useful. If they are inaccurate, they can tell you that you're fucking something up, which is also useful. Only the kind of person who needs science to be this black and white, this is good, this is bad, the rest can be completely ignored mindset, would think that actual scientists are somehow fucking upset by reality being demonstrated by science.
Why was it seen as a failure and a disappointment? Because it failed to meet the paradigm expectations, showing that the experiment was paradigm-driven, looking for evidence of what astronomers already believed to support the heliocentric model.
Or you're fucking lying, and no one thinks that he failed to prove the Earth was moving because he wasn't even trying to do that. I cannot imagine what it is like to be one of your followers when they check into your lies and then find out that they're lies, presuming they don't immediately leave the giant lying dickhead. The kind of mental gymnastics they must have to do to excuse the fact that seemingly nothing you claim is fucking true. Well, I would feel sorry for them if their utter and obvious ignorance didn't disgust me so much.
Is Airy, an accomplished astronomer, listed in those hallowed halls of astronomy? Try to find the name George Bedell Airy in a modern student textbook, university curriculum, or glossy encyclopedia of astronomy.
The absolute vast majority of scientists throughout history do not make it into science textbooks, Because of course they fucking don't. No one would expect them to. There are a lot of them, and especially not if they were doing a pretty minor experiment attempting to demonstrate something that literally doesn't exist. Ultimately, most science media talks about the science itself, the ideas, not the random individuals that might have helped construct them. If you want the history of it, you have to, check the fucking history textbooks. In fact, that you have found him at all, considering that you are a basic bitch who couldn't research his way out of a wet paper bag, means that he is actually probably pretty well known. He just isn't a household name for discovering something groundbreaking like Einstein or Newton or the guy who invented whiskey, because he more or less didn't.
There may be a brief mention, but other than that, virtually nothing. It appears George Bedell Airy has been airbrushed out of history.
Oh, you gotta love the attempted parallel with Nikolai Yeshov being taken out of photos of Stalin, when again, the reason that you know about him at all is because he fucking hasn't been. He has been just as well recorded as any other mildly notable figure from the time. In fact, and do calm down Wikipedia haters, I'm just going to use it to prove a point, but his entry is pretty comprehensive and relatively long, with links to several concepts that he was instrumental in establishing.
He did, without any doubt, make many worthy contributions to other areas of astronomy, and retired as Astronomer Royal in 1881.
Something you just can't find out anywhere because of how erased from history he wasn't. Nothing to see here. Definitely not tons of information on the guy and the things that he did that were correct. And on that point, it kind of shows how that Airy's fuck up, or whatever we called it, points out one of the things he did that didn't work because of many of them doing that. It's actually noteworthy that the man was wrong about something, because he was. And ultimately, it wasn't even that big of a deal to anyone but those addicted to lying about reality.
As seen in the following photos, the plumes from erupting volcanoes can be blown by prevailing winds thousands of feet above.
Oh, that's what that picture is. I thought it was an image of all the hot air escaping from Eric. So voluminous the bullshit is, it can be seen from miles around as it reaches into the fucking stratosphere. I would be impressed if I wasn't more concerned he might be directly responsible for another fucking ice age.
But where there are no prevailing winds above, sometimes the plumes go straight up, as seen in the following photos.
Yes, that's exactly what we would expect them to do. Why wouldn't they? There's no wind. No wind means no move. This is some pretty basic-ass meteorology. Can you just get to your stupid point so I can make fun of it for you, please?
Now, using scientific observation and common sense, how could this be the case if the Earth is rotating on its axis at 19 miles per second on the equator, while at the same time is whizzing around the sun at almost 67,000 miles an hour?
Ah, of course. Me no understand how relativity do work. What a shocking shock. Yeah, no, the speed the planet moves through the solar system or even the universe has literally no effect on how materials that are within Earth's gravitational field behave, at least when they are right next to it. I am sure you have been told this before. Acceleration is the thing that you feel when you are on something. Stable motion looks and feels exactly the same as no motion at all within a closed or relatively closed system. I know you already know this. Stop being so fucking stupid.
When heliocentric believers are confronted with simple facts based on simple observations, science does not matter.
I don't think there's any other response to this than no you, Eric. When you are presented with simple facts and observations, instead of accepting them as the facts that they are, you make up new facts, whether they be new facts about how physics works or new historical facts about what a guy was really trying to do. You have literally never given a single about what the science says. Don't pretend that anything has or ever could fucking change about that.